My name is Evelyn, and I need to be honest, I am 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been a woman who loves love, or at least the idea of it. I have always been a hopeless romantic at heart, dreaming of a man who would make me fall in love with a future full of easy laughter, late-night chats that stretch until dawn, and promises of forever. But the reality of my life, it has been far more complicated. I have had too many boyfriends to count if I am being truly honest. Each one began with a dizzying surge of hope, with butterflies in my stomach and a universe of stars in my eyes. I would give it my all, pour myself into them in body and soul, believing every single time that this time would be different, but none of them ended in marriage. None of them even ended in something that felt like it could approach eternity. They left, or I left, and I was left with a growing collection of memories, regrets, and an increasingly wounded heart. I have never felt proud of the ease with which I fell in those relationships, of how quickly I got lost in the heat of the moment. You could say that I do not distinguish men well. And maybe you would be right. I saw potential where there was none. I trusted when I should have been guarded. But that night, standing in the hallway in front of my cousin Rufus's door, I wasn't thinking of men, or of love, or of the tangled chain of mistakes that made up my past. I was just tired, exhausted to the bone after a long day of helping my aunt with groceries, preparing dinner, and expertly dodging her well-meaning but pointed questions about why a pretty girl like me was still single. I just wanted to say goodnight, to feel a little flicker of family warmth before retreating to my room to face another lonely night. That's all it was supposed to be. But what it became was the beginning of everything. This is a story about a line drawn by blood, by family, by every rule society tells us we must follow. It's a line I swore I would never even approach, let alone cross. But I'm telling you this story because I need to understand how it happened, and I need to ask if you believe that sometimes the deepest connections are found in the most forbidden places. Before we go any further, I want to invite you to join our community. If you believe in the power of true unfiltered stories, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue exploring the most complex corners of the human heart. I turned the cool brass knob of the pillow and opened the door. The old hinges creaked softly. The room was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the blinding cool blue glow of a laptop screen on Rufus' desk. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, his shoulders slightly bent, his dark hair disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it for hours. Rufus was 30, just 2 years older than me. And as children we had been inseparable, more like siblings than cousins. He was the quiet one, the deep thinker, always fidgeting with electronic devices or lost in books, while I was the noisy and impulsive one chasing after scraped-knees dreams. Boys, but life had changed both of us. He had moved back into our aunt's house a few months ago, after a difficult soul-crushing breakup with his long-term girlfriend, and I was there because I had lost my rental contract after my own latest romantic flame-out, and I needed a temporary place to stay, a sanctuary to lick my wounds for a few weeks. We were two ships battered by our own private storms, now docked in the same quiet temporary harbor. Rufus, I called in a low voice, stepping into the room. I just wanted to say goodnight. He turned his head slowly and his eyes met mine across the darkness, and there was something different in his gaze. It wasn't the familiar warm brotherly look I had known my whole life. It was intense, almost penetrating, as if he had been waiting for me, expecting me. I felt a small, strange tumble in my stomach, not of excitement but of a sudden sharp anxiety. At first he said nothing. He just looked at me fixedly, and I noticed that his hands were clinging to the edge of the mattress, his knuckles pale in the dim light. The air in the room felt heavy, denser than it should have been, for a simple good night, Evelyn. He finally said, his voice low and firm, a tone I had never heard him use with me before. Come in, close the door. He paused, and his next words sent a chill down my spine. And lock it. I just blinked, my hand still on the doorknob. Lock the door. Why? My mind raced, searching for a logical, innocent explanation. He didn't smile, he didn't offer a joke as I expected. Instead, he just leaned back a little on the bed, without ever taking his eyes off mine. Do it. He repeated, his voice a quiet command. I want to show you something. I hesitated. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to turn around, to force a laugh and say, "Good night, weirdo," and get out of that room. But there was something in his tone, a silent, desperate urgency, that piqued my curiosity and overrode my sense of caution. Rufus was not one for games. He didn't behave strangely for no reason. We had always trusted each other implicitly. We had shared childhood secrets about crushes, fears the time I snuck out to a party, and he covered for me with my parents. There was a deep foundational trust between us. So against my better judgment, against every alarm bell that was ringing in my head, I stepped all the way in and closed the door. The soft click of the lock echoing in the silent room felt like a final, irreversible decision. My heart gave a heavy, painful turn in my chest. I crossed my arms over my chest, a subconscious defensive gesture. "Okay," I said, my voice a little breathless. "What's up? You're acting really weird." He just patted the space on the bed beside him. "Sit down, I'm looking at something. I think you'll find it interesting." I looked over at the laptop that was now on the bed. Its screen was the only source of light in the dark room, projecting flickering, glittering shadows on Rufus's face. The brightness softened his features, making him look almost vulnerable, but I couldn't tell what was playing. The sound was low, a subtle buzz of voices mixed with something else, music perhaps, something slow and rhythmic that seemed to beat in time with the silence. I hesitated for another long moment, my heart beating faster than the faint noise coming from the speakers. Then I took a slow, tentative step forward. The soft soles of my shoes barely made a sound on the old wooden floor. The air between us felt dense, charged with something unspoken, something heavy. I sat on the very edge of the bed, trying to maintain a respectful, safe distance, although the mattress creaked under my weight, breaking the fragile silence. I tucked a loose strand of my brown hair behind my ear, suddenly intensely aware of the worn-out sweatshirt and old pajama pants I was wearing. Comfortable, yes, but now in this strange, charged atmosphere they felt somehow inappropriate. I felt a tingle under his fixed, unwavering gaze, and I felt completely exposed, as if I had entered without realizing it a secret room in a house I thought I knew. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm, tilting my head just enough to see the screen better without moving too close. My breath cut off when I finally saw the images. It was a video for adults, one of those I had seen before by chance, and it always turned off right away, embarrassed and flustered. But this was not something casual or cheesy. It was raw, honest, and unflinching. To people intertwined in a way that was intimate, urgent, and breathtakingly real. The scene oppressed me like a sudden suffocating heat, and I felt my cheeks burn with a deep, profound shame and confusion. I quickly looked the other way, unable to look him in the eyes, my heart beating a hard, frantic rhythm in my ears. "Rufus, what the hell? Why are you watching this in front of me?" His expression did not hesitate. He wasn't ashamed or defensive. He simply turned the screen a little, more so that it was impossible for me to ignore. "Look at it, Evelyn," he said, his voice still low and steady. "It's interesting. I've been thinking a lot lately, about life, about us. We're adults now. We have both gone through things, heartbreaks, mistakes, disappointments. Maybe it's time to stop pretending that we are still the children who built forts out of blankets in this house." I blinked, staring at his face, at the face of the boy who had been my shield against the cruelties of the world in high school, the one constant in my chaotic life. This was not the same Rufus. His eyes reflected something new, something vulnerable, hopeful, perhaps even desperate. "Explore." I repeated his earlier word, my voice just above a whisper. "What do you mean by that? Explore what? Exactly?" He shifted on the bed, getting closer, and the accidental touch of his knee against mine sent an electric chill up my spine. The casual closeness was suddenly anything but casual, and I was caught between the shock and something else, something that was shaking deep under the surface of my skin. "I know you, Evelyn," he said, his voice soft, intimate. "You have always been open to new things. You have had your relationships, your experiences, me too. But here we are, both single, both trapped in this silent house, both feeling lost. Maybe we owe it to ourselves to try something different, just once, just to see how it feels." My mind was spinning a chaotic vortex of confusion and alarm. Rufus, my cousin, my confidant, was telling me things I never ever imagined. It was not just about watching a video anymore. It was about crossing an invisible sacred line that neither of us had ever dared to even acknowledge existed before. I wanted to laugh nervously, to say no, to close the laptop suddenly and take refuge in the safety of my room and pretend that none of this was happening. But the words were caught in my throat, drowned by the frantic beating of my heart, and then, inexplicably, my body betrayed me. A deep spreading warmth flourished in the depths of my being. A spark that had been latent for years extinguished by loneliness and routine. I hated myself for feeling it because my breathing was cut off and my pulse accelerated. But there it was, a fragile and undeniable flame that flickered in the shadows of that silent room. Rufus. This is wrong, I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. We're family, we can't. He just bowed his head, his gaze soft but determined. We're adults, Evelyn, he said, his voice a gentle but firm counterpoint to my panic. We make our own rules. No one ever has to find out. It's just us, here and now. There's no pressure, but just think about it. We both feel so alone, we both understand each other. Why not? I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed, my eyes fixed on the screen, the video hypnotic in an unexpected way, captivating me despite my outspoken panicked thoughts. I thought about my life, the long series of failed relationships, the nights I had cried myself to sleep, the profound, aching emptiness that clung to me like a shadow. Rufus was right about one thing. I felt desperately, hopelessly alone, and he did too. I could see it in the way his shoulders were bent and how lately he had been quieter than usual, completely lost in his own thoughts. This is the precipice. The moment where a lifetime of should-nots collides with a single overwhelming feeling. What would you do in my place? It's easy to judge from the outside. But when you are drowning in loneliness, sometimes you'll grab onto any hand that's offered, no matter how forbidden. If you understand this impossible choice, if you feel the weight of this moment, please hit that like button. It tells me you're not here to judge, but to understand. The minutes passed like slow, dark shadows, lengthening endlessly while the video continued to play silently in the background, fading into something almost irrelevant. I didn't move. I couldn't. I felt my body waking up from a deep and forgotten slumber, reawakening in unexpected ways. A strange, electric energy buzzed under my skin, curling and tingling in places I didn't remember having felt in what seemed like an eternity. Each nerve was alive. Each breath exaggerated and noisy in the profound silence of the room. I hated the intensity of how real everything felt, how my mind screamed a firm and desperate no, while my body whispered almost seductively maybe. Rufus was sitting there completely motionless. A silent sentry in the darkness. His eyes held me tight. He didn't move restlessly. He didn't bite his lip or shift his weight nervously like someone anxious about crossing a limit. No, there was a profound calm in him, an almost unbearable stillness, like a constant flame that burned silently but powerfully. Just under the surface, there was no hunger in his gaze. No impatience, no expectation, no pressure floating in the air between us, only that firm, conscious calm, as if he understood something about us that I still did not grasp. As if he were ready and willing to live in this fragile, suspended moment forever. No matter what I chose, and somehow that made it all worse. That made it all the more tempting. A slow, dangerous heat began to spread through my chest, unfolding like a fire under my ribs. It was not just desire. It was something older, heavier, a whole life of longing, that had been plunged into pain and disappointment, years of feeling invisible, ignored, like a ghost wandering through my own story. But there in that silent room with Rufus looking at me as if I were the only important person in the world, that pain began to crystallize into something almost unbearable. Something that demanded to be felt. I felt dizzy, as if I were floating in a space between reality and a dream that I did not fully understand. The voice in my head became stronger, an urgent, panicked cry. This is wrong. He is your cousin. These limits exist for a reason. Stop this. Enough. But then another voice rose up to answer it. A voice that was soft, insistent, and dangerous in its tenderness. But this is also real. This feeling is real. I no longer knew which voice to trust. The war inside me was a cyclone that was tearing my soul apart, swallowing saliva with difficulty, my throat dry and tight. I barely heard my own voice when I finally whispered into the heavy air, okay, just once, but no one can ever know. The words felt fragile, like a secret slipping between cracked, hesitant lips, and at that moment, as soon as they were spoken, everything changed. Nothing would ever be the same. Again, something in his eyes shifted like a storm that finally calms down. The tension that had enveloped him like a suit of armor began to dissipate. revealing something raw, tender, and incredibly vulnerable underneath. His gaze softened, holding mine, as if I were the only person in the world who had ever truly seen him. A small, gentle smile curved his lips. It was not petulant. It was not expectant. It was only deeply gentle, a kindness that pressed on my chest and stole my breath. No one will. Evelyn, he said, his voice a low, solemn promise. I promise, and that was all. That was all I needed to hear. We approached each other not with urgency, but with a kind of reverence, as if something sacred and ancient had just awakened between us. Like two magnets attracted by an invisible, undeniable force, we were unable to resist. His hand sought mine, hesitant at first, his finger stroking the back of my hand, like a silent question. I did not respond with words. I did not have to. My stillness was the answer. My breath contained and trembling was the answer. The space between us thickened. It shimmered like the heat that rises from the pavement in the summer. Like the air just before a thunderstorm, it was carried freighted with things that neither of us had dared to say out loud our entire lives. My heart beat hard against my thoracic box, a wild and relentless drum. I was sure he could feel it, hear it, maybe even taste it in the charged silence. But even so, I did not move away. I did not want to. His other hand rose, brushing a loose strand of my hair behind my ear with such a slight feather-light touch that it burned my skin. Every centimeter of my being waited. It ached for what was next. My pulse was a drumbeat that resounded in my ears. And when he tilted his head, leaning in so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my lips, the world outside that room vanished. I could only concentrate on the crackling electricity that sparked in the small precious space that separated us. And then he kissed me, softly, carefully, as if he were afraid he was going to break me, as if we were going to break. The contact was light as a feather at first, tempting like a whispered question asking for an answer, but once we crossed that line, once the connection was truly established, it was as if both of us had been dragged out to sea by a tide we could not fight. The kiss deepened, the urgency rising like a flame seized by the wind. Hands found skin, hearts found a shared rhythm, and all rational thoughts evaporated into pure, overwhelming sensation. It was not just a kiss, it was a surrender, a liberation from fear, a claim to something that neither of us had dared to name until that very moment. And while we hugged, breathless and trembling, we felt that we had finally crossed the surface of something vast and unknown, just to realize that we had been drowning all this time. And now finally we could breathe. I wish I could say that I fought against it, that I resisted with every fiber of my being. But the truth, the raw and undeniable truth, is that I did not. I let it happen. More than that, a deep secret part of me wanted it to happen, not out of carelessness or blindness to the consequences that awaited beyond that moment. No, I knew exactly what was at stake. But during that fragile, fleeting moment, none of that mattered. Not the world with all its judgments, not the tangled rules we were supposed to follow, not the names or titles, cousin, family that we wore like armor. What mattered was the feeling, the urgent, painful need to be close, to be understood, to be seen. Rufus moved with a careful, deliberate grace, each slow gesture feeling like a silent promise. A sacred vow exchanged without words. His hands did not rush. They stopped, exploring the space between us with a reverence, as if tracing the outline of a memory that we both feared we would forget. I could feel the electricity in the air, a delicate tension that vibrated under our skin, connecting us in a language that only our bodies could speak. I found myself imitating his instinct. My own movements softened, responding to the subtle signals of his breathing mixing with mine, the warmth of his fingers that felt like a lifesaver in a lonely ocean. There was no need for words, only the silent conversation of two indecisive and unprepared souls. I felt myself being drawn and deeply immersed in a place that I never imagined reaching, a place where our own beauty danced together, where my own vulnerability was at the same time terrifying and exhilarating. Time seemed to blur, to dilute between moments of silent, profound intimacy and the rapid, thunderous heartbeat of my own heart. The world outside the fragile bubble we had created completely vanished until only the constant, steady rhythm of skin against skin and the whispering symphony of our shared breaths mattered. Every second was a revelation, terrifying in its exposition, but overwhelming in its raw, fragile beauty. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. Silence enveloped me like a wave, dense and suffocating, heavier than before. The air felt thick, loaded with all that was not said. and the room seemed to shrink, closing in on me like a knot that was tightening. My breathing was interrupted, irregular, too loud in the stillness, too sharp against the silence. In the corner, the pale blue glow of the laptop flickered softly, its cold light piercing the darkness like a silent, indifferent witness to everything that had just happened. My body was still trembling with a persistent warmth on my skin, even as a sudden sharp chill of reality invaded me, acute and relentless. I looked for the thin blanket on his bed and brought it close to my chin, shrugging under it like a frightened child. The weight of what we had done struck me like a torrent, overwhelming, relentless, impossible to escape. What did we just do? This was Rufus, my cousin, my family, my blood. A slow poison called shame began to filter through my veins, spreading through my thoughts like a dark creeping fog. My mind raced, turning, trying to find a way to become who I was before this moment had destroyed everything. I didn't dare look at him, not yet, but I needed to. I could feel his fixed gaze on me. Inquisitive, full of a concern that I knew reflected my own. "Are you okay?" His voice erupted in the storm that was roaring in my head. It was so tender, just a whisper. I turned slowly, not knowing what I would see in his face. I don't know, I whispered, my throat dry. I feel everything all at once, alive, awake, but all so bad, so bad. I stopped, struggling to breathe. This can't happen again, it's not okay. No matter how it felt, it's just not. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said after a long pause. "I've been telling myself the same thing for days. But I needed to know what it was with you. I needed to feel it. I'm sorry if I crossed a line. You didn't push me," I said, sitting up, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. "Don't say that," I said. "Yes, I made the choice. I didn't think I would feel like this afterward. I thought it would answer something for me. But now I just have even more questions." He looked at me, and for an instant I saw it, regret, perhaps, or something deeper. He didn't speak. I didn't either. The silence between us was no longer comfortable or charged. It was filled with things we couldn't say out loud, with decisions we couldn't undo. I didn't know what this meant for us, if it meant anything at all. I didn't know if we could go back, or if we had just burned the bridge without even realizing it. But of one thing I was certain, nothing would ever be the same again, and maybe, just maybe, that scared me more than anything else. I stood up, my legs trembling, and grabbed my sweatshirt from the floor. I couldn't look at him as I unlocked the door and slipped out. The hallway was dark and silent. I made it back to my room, closed the door, and sank onto the bed, my head in my hands. What had I done? I had gone in to say goodnight. And now my entire world felt like it had been turned upside down. The days that followed were a quiet, agonizing dance of avoidance. We moved around each other in the house like ghosts. The memory of that night, a third, invisible presence in every room. I helped my aunt in the garden. I started looking for a new apartment with a frantic energy. I tried to focus on anything that would distract me from the chaos in my own mind. But Rufus was always there in the background. A constant, silent reminder. One evening, about a week later, I was sitting on the back porch watching the sunset, tinting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The door opened and Rufus came out with 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to me and sat down on the steps beside me. We didn't speak for a long time, just watching the day end. Finally, he breathed out, his voice low and unsure. "Evelyn, I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's right or wrong, if we crossed a line, or if we just stumbled upon something we were always meant to find. I just know that I care about you so much. Maybe more than I should, and as confusing as it is, I just want you to be happy, even if that means we never ever talk about this again." His words hung in the cool evening air, soft but heavy. I turned to look at him, and in that moment his face was stripped bare of all the quiet brooding, all the thoughtful silence. He just looked raw, open, and painfully human. I felt a tightness in my chest. I thought of all the men who had come and gone, the empty promises, the unanswered calls, and then there was Rufus, steady, present, the one who showed up when everyone else disappeared. I had never thought to look for connection in him, but there it was. Not the fairy tale kind, not the kind with roses and grand declarations, but something real. Something that made my heart beat with a strength it hadn't felt in years. "I care about you too," I said, filing my voice, almost breaking. "I don't even know what that means, Rufus. I'm terrified. This shouldn't be happening. You're my voice trailed off, unable to say the word. Cousin." It felt too small and too complicated all at once. He reached out his hand, hesitated and then rested it on the step near mine. Close enough for me to feel his warmth. Evelyn, he murmured, we don't have to figure it all out tonight. Or even tomorrow, we don't owe anyone an answer. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, for whatever you need. A lump formed in my throat, and tears stung the back of my eyes. I blinked up at the darkening sky. The first stars were beginning to appear, flickering like tiny distant hopes. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like I had to be strong or quiet or defensive. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel anything, I whispered, tired of being scared of what it might mean. Maybe this is wrong. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's everything, but I don't want to run away from it anymore. He nodded in the growing darkness, a silent understanding passing between us. We just sat there, two silhouettes against the fading twilight. The silence was a comfort now, not a wall. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if the world would ever understand, or if we would ever find clarity in this beautiful, terrifying chaos. But right then, under the silent witness of the stars, feeling the fragile real thing that was growing between us, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. And so we stayed, two broken people in a world that rarely made sense, stepping gently into the unknown, hand in hand, with hearts quietly, cautiously opening, not with promises, but with presence, with honesty, with a chance for something more than just surviving, something that felt impossibly like belonging, something that felt against all odds like home.